The sick and twisted plan of the government was to cause 9/11 to get people to submit. I'm sorry if I am insulting 9/11 victims' family members, but as I believe this to be proof, I'm attempting to make sure that they did not die in vain, and I'm attempting to honor and respect them. This is what I believed happened on 9/11, and why I believe this conspiracy is true. Bush and Osama's brother partnered in an oil company, so even conspiracy theorists would blame Osama. It happened at 5:23, but a certain newscast broadcasted it early before the attack even occurred at 5:01. It's a bit odd, especially since 5:01 on a date is May 1st, the day Osama was declared dead. If you play the attacks very slowly, it explodes a split second before the plane crashes into it. Bush, on the day of 9/11, was reading a book to children called Pet the Goat. A book about veiled pagan rituals was read by Bush, who insisted to read it to the children, while millions of Americans were jumping to their death. Pan is a false god or demon, and in paganism is the god of goats. How an outline of a pan-like demon's head was seen in the flames. How the oil-rich countries were invaded and not Arabia, which was allegedly bin Laden's home country. How 8 of the 19 Muslims were already dead by the dawn of September 2001. Why IDs would be necessary if the Muslims knew they were performing a suicide mission, and if they did bring it, how would it survive that destruction unblemished and wind up in government hands in 48 hours? How the people who were on the brother flight of the plane and saw how that plane took off were not allowed to share the story. Firemen were actually counting down to something. An artifact was found circa 2000 BC, that's when it dated to, in Egypt, saying in 4,000 years from then they would have a destructive plan to make people give in to the plans of the ones who are abhorrous. In an Illuminati plan book it states, Plan 2000, caused an event like Pearl Harbor to generate submission. How a Zionist brought World Trade Center 7. How after him, Marvin Bush headed the WTC, World Trade Center building. The electricity on the plane. How politicians and their relatives were told to go, that the buildings were coming down. They thought it meant construction. It defies physics for a building to be destroyed and come down like that, and get destroyed the way it did by the government explanation. Someone was saying that was not a government plane, perhaps to convince herself. Muddled accounts of when Bush saw the first plane came from Bush. He said he saw it live, but the first plane was not broadcasted live. The bottom floor seems to collapse and it falls from top to bottom. An implosion? Someone said they heard an explosion on the ground. Terrorist attack said to be likely thing a day before 9/11 by Bush. May Day, the satanic day of sacrifice. Hitler and Osama were announced dead then. The Illuminati card game has a card which gives a depiction of 2 towers destroyed in a way the Twin Towers were destroyed. The heading says terrorist nuke, not plane crash, but nuke. This card game was made in 1995. It predicted it, and the destruction of the towers in the card looks exactly the way it does, except a slightly different. It looks almost exactly the way it did in 9/11. Technically, if this was an inside job, Bush could be called a terrorist, and the inside job would be the nuke. I believe this was used to make people join the war, so Bush could get oil, money, and be the head of the origin place of the occult. Also, vaccinations to non-existent diseases, submission, unification, invasion, and elite-controlled depopulation would globalize, so the New World Order would be created, and the alleged terrorist lies would give people an excuse to endorse the persecuted Zionists. But Osama growing up was a gangster. He converted to Islam and became a devout Muslim. By the late 1980s, he found that the only way to convert the Middle Eastern kings to Islam was with communist aid. So he sided with the communists until they invaded the Middle East in 1990s. So he naturally sided with their enemy. The USA found in 1998 that he was a good person to blame for the attacks they were planning, so that first they blamed Osama for killing somebody. Osama was so mad then he went on a rampage, reverting back to his secular gangster self, and bombed a building, killing 200 people, which gave Clinton and his Wiccan convent, or Senate, an excuse to say it was Osama when 9/11 occurred. In 2002, bin Laden took advantage of the fact that some Muslims believed in non-existent mythical creatures called Al-Qaeda, so they asked Osama if they could join it. So Osama abused their radicalism for the sake of violence. He was killed in 2002 and replaced by a CIA asset, Tim Osman, who was recently killed, so the next attacks could be blamed on retaliating Iraqis. Also, secularism, establishing a alleged conservative order, enforcing the secular norm is despicable. Also, the murderous act of abortion is despicable. As for the Antichrist, he shall have 10 horns and 7 heads. This is a metaphor. The 7 heads are the 7 world powers that preceded his Antichrist system. These are the seven powers that preceded his Antichrist system. 1. Babylon, 2348 BC to 586 BC. 2. Persia, 586 BC to 333 BC. 3. Greece, 333 BC to 59 BC. 4. Rome, as Roman Empire, 59 BC to 476 AD. As Arthurian Empire, 476 to 537. As Papacy, 537 AD to 800. As Holy Roman Empire, 800 to 1300. 5. Caliphate, 1300 to 1500, in the form of the Ottoman Empire, slightly different than Caliphate. 6. England, 1500 to 1776. 7. USA, 1776 to 1939. 8. His system, NWO, as Nazi Empire, 1933 to 1945. As NATO, 1945 to 1950. As UN, 1950 to 1992. As EU, 1992 to 1993. As EU-controlled UN, 1993 to 2012. As NWO, 2012 to 2019. 9. The only good world power, Christendom, the Kingdom of Christ, which will occur from 2019 to 3019. But we don't know this date. This might not be the right date. Who knows? In the Bible it says only the Lord knows, for only the Father knows. Also, the Illuminati plan to create a one-world government for the Antichrist. The UN is secretly planning this. The capital is New York. New York is called the Empire State. The UN is a new Roman Empire, which the Antichrist will begin to lead. WW2, or World War II, was used by both sides to cause the population through war and vaccinations to false diseases, making the real disease a vaccination. This elite-controlled population was used alongside of submission and unification by invasion to create the one-world government of the NWO. The Hitler you learn about in school is a twisted, sick, dictatorial maniac straight out of hell. I can tell you he's much worse than that. Judaism, or monotheistic denial of Christ, is sinful and wrong, yet untolerating something in such a sick and twisted way is an act against fellow human, which Hitler did again and again. His secret purpose was to kill all who were not of the 13th Illuminati bloodline, called Aryans, to pay homage to the heretical Aryans, and turn descendants of the Indian Aryans, descendants of the Strebites, the real Indians, and Arius, the son and brother of the ancestors of Tibetan Dropas, and descended from Dropas, who were in turn descended from aliens. Brutal satanic training was done to witches and occultists in the guise of persecution. Murder of the occultists was a sacrifice to Satan. Hitler persecuted Jews and non-Aryans, atheists, homosexuals, and other persuasions to make people think that people should accept their ideas because intolerance is basically what Hitler did. But intolerance is good, as long as it is kind, for the whole point of moral prosperity is out of love. Hitler basically set the stage for the NWO. Rome as a specific country fell in 476, but its empire lived on and took many names and guises until 1300. Until 537, from 476, it was known as the Arthurian Empire. From 537 to 800, it was a papacy, and the papacy still retained the papacy, but transferred the Roman Empire to Charlemagne, under whom it was the Holy Roman Empire. 1300, the Holy Roman Empire officially abolished its position as a Roman Empire, and thus the Holy Roman Empire became the Empire of Austria. 1799, a man from the home country of the First Realm's first guys, Italy, went to the first home place of the First Realm's fourth guys, France, and established the Second Roman Empire, after destroying the Austrian Empire in fear of the Austrian heir claiming the Second Rome. The Second Rome fell to ruins once it was no longer necessary, and would get in the way of the Illuminati plans which were the only reason the Napoleonic empires of Second Rome were created anyway. The Napoleonic empires fell in the 1870s. A man from the second and final capital of the First Realm's fourth guys, or Austria, moved to the victor and destroyer of the Second Realm, Germany, to create the Third Realm, the Nazi Empire. After Britain allegedly defeats Germany, it shapes Nazism into NATO, redubbed in 1950s as UN. The EU was founded in 1992 as a director and organizer of the UN. It was absorbed by the UN, or, as more accurate phrasing, was put in control of the UN. A man from Germany entered the Second Realm. A man from Germany began the Third Realm. A man from Britain allegedly ended the Third Realm. Will a Brit be the one who forms the EU-UN into the NWO and heads it as the Antichrist? The Bible says he belongs to Assyria. a metaphor for his country, but becomes the king of Babylon before beheading the new Rome and after killing 3 kings. Was the old king of Babylon one of these kings? The metaphorical nations of Assyria, Babylon, and Canaan are mentioned in the Holy Book as the main nations of the end times. Are these the countries he conquers, or tricks, spies, or deceives his way into and secretly assassinates his leaders? It says his metaphorical native nation is Assyria. That concludes our first episode. Tune in tomorrow if you wish. Remember, always follow the gospel and the laws of the Bible. Peace be with you. Thanks be to God.